We have 4 more weeks with Director Gabbard as the DNI, and I look forward to implementing last year's Intelligence Authorization Act with her to implement wide-ranging reforms that will shrink the DNI and take it back to its original intent to provide a mere coordinator or process role for the intelligence community. I have no observations on the matter.
Chair of the Intelligence Committee, Republican Senator Tom Cotton, saying he has no observations on the matter. The matter was President Trump's appointment yesterday of Bill Pulte as acting director of national intelligence. Pulte, who leads the Federal Housing Finance Agency, has no known background in intelligence, defense, or national security. But he is a Trump loyalist who has pushed for mortgage fraud cases against public officials that Trump views as political enemies. They include New York Attorney General Letitia James, Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California, as well as Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. Let's bring in MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde. David, good morning. Your latest reporting focuses on new warnings from Democrats about Pulte. Senator Mark Warner of Virginia told you this. What I've been concerned about for ages is, will the Trump administration or people inside it try to manipulate our elections this fall? We already saw that with the prior DNI in terms of Tulsi Gabbard grabbing these ballot boxes in Fulton County. If I was concerned about Tulsi Gabbard, Bill Pulte raises those concerns tenfold. And Democratic Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts said he shared Warner's concerns, telling you this is, without question, a further continuation of the Trump administration goals to put yes-men, lackeys in place who will further the goal that was begun to compromise the elections in Atlanta, in Georgia, and states around the country. So, David, I'll simply add to this that by law, DNI is supposed to have extensive experience in this field. Pulte, of course, does not. What are some of the other concerns you're hearing?
First of all, the lack of experience is important. We're at war right now with Iran, and Pulte's job is to coordinate all the national intelligence. There's also no director of the National Counterterrorism Center. Joe Kent, who held that job, resigned over the war several weeks ago. But the real issue with Pulte is his loyalty to the president. He's 38 years old. He has never worked in intelligence. His family owned a large construction company. He worked for that and worked in private equity. And then the way he used his time running this federal agency that's involved in banking issues and mortgages was to feed information to help investigations of the president's rivals. And I don't want to exaggerate, or I don't want to alarm people, but I think it's important to talk about worst-case scenarios here. And Tulsi Gabbard, as was mentioned in the quote, went to Fulton County, Georgia, seized election records that she hoped would bolster President Trump's claims that the 2020 election was stolen. And there's a lot of fears that Pulte will do the same thing. And there's some scenarios which I can talk about them literally trying to stop the voting in certain places on Election Day in November.
So, Rufus, that is Pulte's qualification areas. The Trump loyalist, and he's willing to be a hatchet man, in the words of a Democrat who I spoke to yesterday. And it's very clear that the Trump retribution campaign, though politically unpopular with voters, is not only going to continue, it may accelerate.
Yeah, and it's clearly a priority of the president's. I mean, this appointment just speaks to exactly that. Look, these are DNI. I mean, this is an apolitical job, Jonathan. It has to be for our country to be what its promise is. And I think that it is extraordinary to see someone as woefully unqualified as Pulte get this appointment. Now, I do hope that there is bipartisan opposition to his confirmation. Of course, even as acting, I think that we should have fears and ask some legitimate questions about this. But it is, I mean, I think Americans are just sick and tired of woefully unqualified people becoming members of Donald Trump's cabinet. And it's shameful. It's absolutely shameful.
And David, loyalty seems to be the point, though, that's not about qualifications. It's about serving the president. Talk to us about those fears with the elections in November, because they, as polls suggest that, Democrats are in for a big fall. There is some fear in the party, though. The Republicans do everything they can to try to meddle.
So the nightmare scenario, and this hasn't happened, but I think it's our job as journalists to raise it, would be, so Pulte could claim he has intelligence showing that, let's say, China, has taken control of voting machines in a blue district, blue parts of Texas, and try to shut down the voting there using federal agents. He could try to do that in Georgia, Fulton County, Georgia, a heavily Democratic area. That could decide 2 Senate races. And what would happen, let's say that happens early on Election Day, Democrats in those states would immediately, go to a court and try to get a court order, and likely a judge would say, no, you don't have the power to stop this, Bill Pulte. Elections throughout American history are run by state and local officials. You just had Mark Wayne Mullen, the acting DHS secretary, say he's going to defy a court order if he doesn't, and the president doesn't agree with it. I mean, this is astonishing what's happening. This has never happened before in American history. And again, maybe this won't happen, but I just feel it's my duty. These are scenarios that election experts and others have talked to me about, and now it's very possible that Bill Pulte could attempt something like this.
Yeah, there's some Democratic governors who have been sounding similar alarms of late as well.